You're watching Reason and Theology Live, a show dedicated to charitable discussions, debates, interviews, commentary, and analysis. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Reason and Theology. Your host, Michael. On a Wednesday, I want to look at some clips from Father James Altman and his comments on Pope Francis, and I then want to consider them in light of what sacred scripture says about how we should speak about those who are in authority in the church. And then I also want to look at canon law and compare again the behavior and the words and the tone of Father Altman to scripture and canon law and see if they're in harmony or in conflict with each other. Certainly think that there are some reasons for concern here because I'm seeing a lot of vitriol from Father James Altman and the way that he refers to the bishops, but especially Pope Francis. Now, I do think that there are some things that Father Altman has to say that are true. I think he has some genuine concerns in some areas. And I think that some of the people he criticizes do deserve some criticism. I'm questioning the way in which it's done in light of sacred scripture and canon law. And I'm asking the question, is this the way to sanctity? And is this the way to solve the current crisis in the Catholic Church? Or is this adding more to the problem in the Catholic Church? Let me share my screen. Let's watch just a few clips that I edited. I just took a few clips from a longer interview that's about 48 minutes. I'll put a link to it in the description, but I just edited it down so that way I don't have to skip while live here on stream. I can just play straight through and you'll see the parts that I want to comment on. Okay. Well, let me make sure to enable audio, make sure that y'all can hear. And let's examine his comments.
I don't care whether Bergoglio or Bishop Barron, I don't care whether Bergoglio or Bishop Barron or some of these other losers come up with some nice things to say. Jeff, no, he's only preaching pastoral when it suits his whim and caprice of teaching false ideologies and promoting it throughout the world. There's nothing pastoral about Jorge Bergoglio. Sure. He's a liar.
Yeah.
You asked. Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
But you don't meet with Cardinal Zinn, you filthy viper of a fake fraud of a pope.
Yeah.
All right, let's examine those and listen to it in just again in just a moment. Notice how he continues to refer to him as Berg. What I've noticed is a lot of people who don't believe that Pope Francis is Pope refer to him as such. So I think it's a legitimate question to ask. Father Altman, do you believe Pope Francis is the Pope? It's an honest question. If so, can you please call him by his papal name? Why the disrespect? Why the tone that we see here? Moreover, he calls him a fake, a fraud, a liar. So he's accusing him of lies. Let's listen to it again.
I don't care whether Bergoglio or Bishop Barron or some of these other losers.
So he's a loser, according to Father Altman. And this is something that I see very, very frequently with him. He is constantly calling the bishops and Pope Francis losers and vipers from hell. And earlier, or actually later on in the interview, he says, John the Baptist called them vipers from hell. Father Altman, you are not John the Baptist, and you are not a prophet. Please don't appeal to a prophet of God and say, hey, see, he's doing it, therefore I can. As I'm going to show here in a moment, St. Paul refused to go down that route because he knew he was not a John the Baptist. St. Paul recognized his limitations. And if St. Paul recognized his limitations and recognized he could not go down that route, such like maybe Jesus did or John the Baptist did, then how much more is it the case that Father Altman can't go down this route? Well, very clearly he can't, as we'll see here in just a moment when I go through Acts 23. But let's continue.
come up with some nice things to say. Jeff, no, he's only preaching pastoral when it suits his whim and caprice of teaching false ideologies and promoting it throughout the world. There's nothing pastoral about Jorge Bergoglio. He's a liar.
So again, publicly accuses Pope Francis of lying. That's a very, very grave sin. That is a very grave sin. Unless he can back that up, that is a major, major problem. And again, compare this accusation of being a liar to what we're going to see here in a moment from St. Paul.
Yeah.
Sorry, you asked. Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
But you don't meet with Cardinal Zinn, you filthy viper of a fake fraud of a pope.
Yeah.
Fake fraud of a pope. Very hard to believe that he actually thinks that Pope Francis is the pope whenever he speaks of him as a fake fraud of a pope and a man who wears the white and constantly refers to him as Bergoglio. Again, I think it's fair to ask, in light of these things, does Father Altman believe that he's a pope or not? I would love some clarification there, because it seems pretty strange to say that, yeah, he does believe he's the pope. Let's compare this behavior that we just saw here about these accusations of you're a liar, you're a fake, you're a fraud, you're a viper from hell and this and that. Let's compare that to St. Paul, and let's see if there's some harmony here or maybe some disagreement. Acts 23. And looking intently at the council, Paul said, "Brothers, I have lived my life before God in all good conscience up to this day." And the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall." That's a reference to Jesus. Jesus actually used that term. "Are you sitting to judge me according to the law? And yet, contrary to the law, you order me to be struck." Those who stood by said, "Would you revile God's high priest?" And Paul said, "I did not know, brothers, that he was the high priest, for it is written, 'You shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people.'" Now notice this. St. Paul is saying of a high priest who does not accept Jesus as the Messiah. He says of him, he was wrong to speak to him in this way. He recognized he's not Jesus. He can't refer to them in this way. He recognizes he's not St. John the Baptist. He can't call them vipers from hell. He recognizes he is not to speak evil against the ruler of his people. And that's in particular a high priest who, once again, rejects Jesus as the Messiah. If that is true of St. Paul for a high priest after the crucifixion and resurrection who rejects Jesus as the Messiah, how much more is it true for us and for Father Altman in relation to a pope? So this seems to transgress sacred scripture, and an appeal to John the Baptist doesn't work, because my rejoinder is, so when St. Paul thought he couldn't do that, do you think you're greater than St. Paul, Father Altman? It's a legitimate question. Moreover, let's take a look at canon law. Canon 212, often cited for this kind of stuff. Conscious of their own responsibility, the Christian faithful are bound to follow their Christian obedience, those things which the sacred pastors, inasmuch as they represent Christ, declare as teachers of the faith or establish as rulers of the church. So if they're teaching and governing, there is a level of obedience and assent. The Christian faithful are free to make known to the pastors of their church their needs, especially spiritual ones, and their desires, according to the knowledge, competence, and prestige which they possess. They have the right, and even at times the duty, to manifest to the sacred pastors their opinions on matters which pertain to the good of the church, and make their opinion known to the rest of the Christian faithful, without prejudice to the integrity of faith and morals, with reverence towards their pastors. Notice that. With reverence towards their pastors. Was that behavior reverent? And attentive to common advantage and the dignity of persons. Did that recognize the dignity of their person? No, it did not. So somebody might say, but he's right. He's right to criticize this and that. I understand that. I think that he has some legitimate criticisms. But this is not the way to go about doing it according to canon law and according to sacred scripture. And that's my concern. We do have a right to make known our concerns to our pastors and to others, but not like this. We have to keep in mind reverence towards our pastors. And if we do that, we can be much more effective voices in our criticisms and our concerns. Because if we go off the rails and, become unhinged like this, we aren't going to be listened to by our pastors. They're not going to hear us. I want to also look at one more canon. New canon, just promulgated recently by Pope Francis. A person who publicly incites among subjects animosities or hatred against the apostolic see, or an ordinary, that's a bishop, because of some act of power or ecclesiastical ministry, or provokes subjects to disobey them, is to be punished by an interdict or other just penalties. Notice this: incites subjects animosities or hatred against apostolic see or an ordinary. The kind of language that we heard, by the way, I don't know if y'all could see that. Let me just share it on my screen. Just in case. A person who publicly incites among subjects animosities or hatred against the apostolic see, or an ordinary because of some act of power or ecclesiastical ministry, or provokes subjects to disobey him, is to be punished by an interdict or other just penalties. But again, I'm highlighting the fact those who publicly incite animosity or hatred against the Pope or a bishop. And then again, the other canon that I quoted, in case it wasn't on the screen, was Canon 212. From what we saw, is that being reverent to our pastors, or is that stirring up hatred and animosity towards them? I'll let you decide, but I think it's pretty obvious which one it is. And then lastly, my question is, we love Padre Pio. We think he is a great saint. That is, Catholics who want to be faithful to tradition. We tend to love Padre Pio, and rightly so. Would Padre Pio behave this way? No. Did Padre Pio behave this way to people who kind of deserved it? No, he did not. So I'm concerned that we're going down the wrong path here whenever we start to engage in this kind of behavior, and we are not being as effective as we could be whenever we lodge certain complaints and criticisms, some of which, like I said, are legitimate. Because again, there are some things that Father Altman says that, you know what, I agree with him. I think he has a legitimate concern here, and I think he has legitimate criticism. But let's go about leveling it in a way that is cognizant of sacred scripture and canon law, because that would be a virtuous way to present it, as opposed to this. Let's look at one more thing. One more clip here, because what I'm saying here is an excessive appeal to conspiracy theories, end times frenzy with Father Altman all throughout the interview. I mean, they believe that we are already through the first 14 chapters of the book of Revelation, as they put it. And they are thinking that, COVID is part of wormwood in the book of Revelation, and all kinds of just silly wackiness, and just, again, end time frenzy conspiracy theory stuff. I thought I got away from that when I was Protestant, and I left Protestantism to become Catholic, but it's evidently still here in the Catholic Church. So we tend to make fun of Protestants for their rapture craze, and yet we have this kind of stuff. But anyways, all throughout the whole video, just excessive conspiracies, and we're going to hear another conspiracy related to Pope Benedict and why he really resigned, all based on speculation by Father Altman. And what's interesting, though, and the real reason why I want to play this particular part of the clip, is he actually affords Pope Benedict the judgment of charity, but he doesn't do the same thing to Pope Francis. And what I mean is this: he seems to like Benedict. And so people ask him, well, why did Benedict appoint this person cardinal and do this and this and this? And those are legitimate questions. I think that we should ask those questions. Why did Pope Benedict do this and that? But he goes to bat for Benedict and says, well, he can't be everywhere. There's 3,500 bishops out there in the world. He can't know everything. He has bad advisors. Okay, but wait. He just got done railing against Pope Francis for some of his prudential decisions, but doesn't afford Pope Francis that same benefit of the doubt and judgment of charity that he just gave to Benedict XVI. It's very odd. And I just want to say, let's be consistent here. Okay, let me play the clip.
People also say, well, why didn't he fix this? Why did he let this bishop do this or something like this? I don't know the names of every parishioner in my parish. I can't. I'm not good at names. But he has 3,800 bishops around the world. Eventually, you have to rely upon the message, the information that's being fed to you.
But why doesn't, again, he afford Pope Francis with that same fair judgment? And it's a legitimate point. Yeah, he's right. Sometimes, a pope is fed bad information and he can't know everything and be everywhere. I think what he's saying is reasonable. Why doesn't he apply that to Pope Francis? It's very odd.
And if you're only being fed bad information, you're going to make a bad decision. So I think at this time and his age, because he's still alive now, this is my theory. It's just.
So here we go with another wild-eyed conspiracy theory that we can add to the list in the Catholic Church. By the way, y'all, non-Catholics are just mocking and laughing at us at this point. It's so absurd how we appeal to these wild-eyed conspiracy theories to try to make sense of what's going on in the Catholic Church today, rather than looking to the most reasonable and commonsensical reasons for what's going on.
It's my opinion. But you know how the angel Gabriel came down and talked to Mary, and periodically God sends messengers down to talk to us. Mm-hmm. I have to believe that somehow in a mystical moment, God told him, listen, if you keep going, you're going to be here for another, he's still alive, another 10 years.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, all these bad actors who have taken over the church are going to continue their evil undermining of the foundation of the church. But no, everybody's going to be looking to you.
And right here, you'll notice the audio stops. This is not on my end. This is on their end. I don't know what he says here, but I wish I knew what he says here, because he's saying during this time, they will look to you. What does he mean by that? They will look to you. Somebody who's not a pope anymore, they'll look to him? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. By the way, in the interview, it's so interesting. They went to the St. Malachi prophecy and everything, and it seemed like Father Altman was right on board with it. So I'm kind of curious, since he seems to be on board with that and thinks that Pope Francis is the last pope, since, again, he's on board with the prophecy, it would mean that Pope Francis is the last pope. I kind of wonder what's going to happen whenever we get a new pope. What, is he going to come back on YouTube and say, hey, no, I'm sorry, in that interview that I was on board with the St. Malachi prophecy? I'm just kind of curious. I should have maybe grabbed that part of the clip, but you could certainly go back and watch the original interview, which was incredibly fascinating, as it was filled with all kinds of fanciful speculation and conspiracies. But again, like I said, getting back to it, I digress. The audio stopped here. I don't know what's going on, so I don't know exactly what he says at this point.
Guys are doing. But if you step aside now, you'll still be alive while these bad guys do what they do, and suddenly they are exposed.
Once again, it cuts out. I don't know why.
This guy over here is still the truth. He's defending the deposit.
He's still the truth. Talking about Benedict, this guy over here, he's still the truth. He's defending the positive faith.
The deposit of faith, whereas is still the truth. He's defending the deposit of faith.
Does that mean he believes Pope Benedict is the Pope and Pope Francis isn't? That would explain why he constantly refers to him as Bergoglio. And that would explain why he thinks that Pope Benedict is maintaining the truth and the deposit of faith whenever he's not actually the Pope. I don't know how to make sense of these comments unless he's operating from a Benevacantist position that says that Pope Benedict is still the real Pope and Pope Francis isn't.
Whereas the Bergoglio and his cronies,
notice again, he calls them Bergoglio.
We could launch into half an hour.
So Let me play that last part one more time.
This guy over here is still the truth. He's defending the deposit of faith, whereas the Bergoglio and his cronies. Well, we could launch into half an hour.
Yeah. Okay. Bergoglio and his cronies. Wow. Where do we start? First of all, why is it that we have to resort to this wild conspiracy that God came to him in an angel and gave him this revelation that this is what's going on? Why are we resorting to this stuff instead of just going with what Pope Benedict actually told us was the reason for his resignation? I don't know. It just seems odd. And moreover, so according to this conspiracy, this all happened to show that Benedict really guards and holds the truth while Francis and his cronies doesn't, except for the little tiny bit about how Benedict actually affirms Pope Francis's ministry, except for that little detail. I don't know how that detail escaped us here, but yeah, Pope Benedict Emeritus affirms the ministry of Pope Francis. So I don't know how that really works, how he's still guarding the deposit of faith when he's adhering to Francis and his cronies. But again, I find that last part very curious because I don't see how he could say what he just said unless he's operating with the benevacantist perspective, which seems to be pretty common these days, which is certainly troubling. But as I say in every video with these guys, because they tend to not state their position very clearly. Sound familiar, right? Isn't that the criticism they have about Pope Francis? Well, they tend to not state their position very clearly. Well, in the same way that they want Pope Francis to come out and state his position clearly and clarify things about the Scalfari interviews, perhaps Father Altman can come out and be very clear with us. Does he believe Pope Francis is the Pope, or does he believe Benedict is the Pope? Which one is it? I mean, it's legitimate for us to ask the question in light of the fact that it really sounds like that's where he's leaning in this last part of that clip. And I think inquiring minds want to know, and we have a right to know. Perhaps he can come out and clarify. And if he doesn't come out and clarify, upon what basis can he then criticize Pope Francis for being unclear and not clarifying himself? I'll also say, why is it that they go right up to the edge of this stuff and fall short from being clear at the very end? Why is that? Seems deliberate to me. They'll go right up to the edge of saying that Pope Francis isn't the Pope, but they'll just stop just shy of saying it. But pretty much everything they're saying adds up to that. Why is that? Sounds like ambiguity to me, right? And in fact, it can be a weaponized ambiguity. Does that sound familiar? Well, it seems that one of the criticisms that they use against Vatican II is weaponized ambiguity. And people can then use this to then promote benevacantism, turning, again, this kind of ambiguity weaponized, making it weaponized. So again, upon what basis can we now start to criticize Vatican II with its weaponized ambiguity, allegedly? Whenever I'm starting to see this kind of seemingly deliberate ambiguity on part of figures in the traditionalist movement who will come right up to the ledge, just shy of saying Pope Francis isn't the Pope. But it's pretty clear that that's what their perspective is. But they won't say it. Again, upon what basis can they criticize others? So I'm asking for some consistency here. That's all I'm asking for. So hopefully what we're going to get is an interview from Father Altman or a video where he just clarifies himself and says, no, I believe Pope Francis is the Pope. Great. That would be helpful. Can you then explain your comments? How is it that Pope Benedict is still guarding the deposit of faith and the cronies aren't, when Benedict affirms the ministry of Francis? I don't know. Again, I hope to get some clarification, but I hope this was helpful. If it was, hit the like button and the subscribe button, share it on your social media. Also check me out, patreon.com/Reason and Theology, if you want to get access to extra content. See you later. God bless.
If you're looking to buy or sell a home, office, or any kind of property anywhere in the world, you're going to want to call Real Estate for Life, and they're going to connect you with a Catholic agent. Now, that agent will donate a portion of their commission upon sale, and Real Estate for Life will donate 75% of that gift to a pro-life organization at no cost to you. Call Real Estate for Life at 1-877-LIFE-US1 or text them 248-431-1440. If you care about the pro-life cause, call them now.
Oh wait, before you go, I would really appreciate it if you would consider supporting this channel. This is my primary means to provide for my family, and it also helps me to produce content like this video. If you would like to support me, become a patron by visiting patreon.com/Reason and Theology. You'll also get access to extra exclusive content when you become a patron. Lastly, hit that like button and the subscribe button, and be sure to leave a comment down below. God bless.